always accused by our adversaries of saying what we are against, right? We're against aggressive wars. We're against the stealing of other people's resources, the rapacious use of other people's oil and water and agricultural products. We are against the aggressive use of the U.S. military. Let's talk a little about what we are for. Because right now we have a foreign policy that is based on aggression, and we have a foreign policy that manipulates the fear of the American people into justifying more aggression. What are we for? We're for a foreign policy that doesn't push people around the world to hate us, that pushes people around the world to love us. So what would be a foreign policy that's based on love? You know, people don't like to talk about love as a foreign policy, but really, we want people to love us around the world, don't we? It would make us so much safer here at home if we were loved around the world. So let me throw out a couple of those, and then we can, you can tell me some of yours. I would say, given that we are here at a green festival, I think one policy that very clearly would make people love us instead of hate us around the world is that instead of just talking about our addiction to oil, we had a serious investment of energy, resources, know-how, skills to move us in the era of green, clean, sustainable energy policy that would stop us from invading other people's countries to get their oil. Other policies that would have people love us around the world, I must mention the U.S. policy in Israel. You cannot go to the Middle East without people telling you that as long as the U.S. continues to have its one-sided support for the Israeli government and continues to spend billions of dollars every year giving military hardware to the Israelis that is used to violate the basic rights of the Palestinian people, we will not be loved in that part of the world. We have to have a policy that stops supporting the Israeli military and that gets serious about a peace plan that will respect the basic rights of both the Israeli population as well as the Palestinians. A policy that would make us more loved and more safe in the world. We'll look right now at what we are facing with the threat of nuclear proliferation in North Korea, in Iran, and possibly in many other countries if indeed we continue on this spiral. It is impossible to stop nuclear proliferation as long as we continue with this incredibly hypocritical policy of saying this country can have nuclear weapons, this country can't have nuclear weapons. This country will abide by its obligations of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but this country won't abide by its obligations. The United States signed on to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It says that we will try to stop any new countries from gaining nuclear weapons, but you know what else it says? It says that those countries that already have nuclear weapons will work to end all nuclear weapons, disarm themselves. We must have a global policy of nuclear disarmament if we are ever going to stop the proliferation. Policies that will make us loved in the world is taking the $2 billion that we are now spending every single week on the war in Iraq and use it to fight the fights that really need to be fought in the world today. The fight against poverty, the fight against AIDS, the fight against global warming. These are the kind of things that $2 billion must be invested in if we are going to be loved throughout the planet. It's very instructive that the Nobel Peace Prize was just given to Mohammed Yunus of the Grameen Bank this year. And that's very instructive because the people who give out the Nobel Peace Prize take peace very seriously. And they understand that as long as there is incredible poverty in the world, there will never be peace in the world. And that's why somebody like Mohammed Yunus, who has spent his life building up banks for the poor that give out loans as small as $10 to try to give people an investment in their future, is part of building peace. Imagine what we could do to support Mohammed Yunus and the kind of people's banks that he has been trying to build if we put the $2 billion we spend every week in this war instead into poor people's banks. Remember last year who got the Nobel Peace Prize? Do you remember? Wangari Maathai from Kenya. What did Wangari Maathai do? Planted trees. And so the people who give out the Nobel Peace Prize made what for some was a leap, but for them was no leap at all, to say, we have got to save this precious planet of ours if we are going to stop war. And that planting trees is one of the best things you can do to secure a more peaceful future for our planet. Imagine what we could do. Imagine how many trees we could be planting with the $2 billion we are spending every week on this unjust, illegal, immoral war in Iraq. We would save the planet and we would be loved by people throughout the world. Another policy that we must work towards, if indeed we're going to be loved in the world, is the issue of U.S. military bases all over the world. The number of U.S. military bases and military installations around the world is over 700. Absolutely astounding, in over 40 countries. You know, one of the reasons given by Osama bin Laden about why he hates the United States was the presence of U.S. military bases in Saudi Arabia. There are U.S. military installations in dozens of countries around the world that make people feel the aggressive hand of the United States. It is time for us to work to end the military occupation of dozens of countries, close down the military bases that have now spread throughout the world. Bring our military home because they are supposed to be a defense of this country, not an offensive force. I want to end with a story from a recent trip that some of us made to Lebanon, because we went to Lebanon at the height of the conflict between Israel and Lebanon, when the bombs were dropping every day. In fact, as most of the people were fleeing the country, a group of 4 women, Gail, myself, and 2 others, went into Lebanon to see who were the targets of the bombing, what was happening, could we help to bring humanitarian aid to people who were suffering. And we went to the refugee camps where thousands of people were sleeping out outside in the parks. We went to try to bring some kind of aid to people to show that we cared about their suffering. And everywhere we went, we heard people telling us that what should have been a border skirmish between Israel and Lebanon had turned into a full-fledged conflict where the Israelis had an overwhelming force responded to that conflict, and that the vast majority of people who were being killed in that conflict were indeed civilians. And people in Lebanon were very, very aware that the bombs that were falling on their homes were sent to them by U.S. manufacturers who had sold their weapons to the Israeli military. In fact, we saw signs all over the place saying, "Bombs brought to you by the USA." And the day that we got there, we met with somebody from the United Nations who said, "You're from the United States and you're here during this bombing. I advise you not to say that you are American citizens." Well, we would go out and look at the results of the bombings, and one day we were in southern Beirut after bombs had just landed the night before in a residential neighborhood. 34 people had been killed, mostly women and children. You saw the smoldering residential apartment. You saw the baby strollers out there, the mattresses out there, what had been a vibrant community destroyed overnight. And we were standing there with some members of that community who were mourning the loss of their loved ones. And one of them came over to me and said, "Where are you from?" Well, there's the dilemma. And while I was thinking, oh my God, am I going to say I'm from Sweden or from Canada or from, wherever, I felt in that moment a real responsibility to say, I'm from the United States. So I said, I'm from the United States. And this guy reached in his pocket, and I thought, uh-oh, maybe he's going to pull out a gun and shoot me. And instead, he pulls out some candy bars. And he said, "Go back to the United States and tell them that while you gave us bombs, we gave you chocolate." So I think if we want to be loved in the world, one of our slogans can be, "Bonbons, not bombs." One of our slogans can be, "Books, not bombs." Our slogans can be, "Healthcare, not warfare." Childcare, not warfare. I think you get the picture. If we want indeed to be safer in this world, we have to show the world that we care about the rest of the world. If we treat the world with kindness, with compassion, with love, with generosity, we will be infinitely safer here at home, and we will have a much healthier, safe planet to give to our children. Thank you very much.